Most people never change, not because they can't, but because they never choose with finality. They want transformation without the discomfort of demolition. They want to rise without letting go of the weight. So they collect habits. They chase morning routines. They tweak surface behaviors, all while protecting the exact identity that's keeping them stuck. But there comes a moment, not loud, not public, when you stop negotiating with the old version of you. When you stop asking how to become better and start asking, who do I refuse to be? From this day forward, and that is the beginning. Not of improvement, but of rebirth. One decision, not convenient, not comfortable, but absolute. If you're ready for that kind of clarity, stay exactly where you are. Because this isn't another motivational video. This is the identity shift you've spent your entire life circling, and it begins right now. How to build an unshakable identity. Start with one ruthless decision. There comes a moment, quiet, invisible, but irreversible, when a person stops pretending. Not to the world, but to themselves. And in that moment, something ancient stirs. Something buried under doubt, under delay, under every excuse and justification ever told. A question echoing through the mind with terrifying clarity. Who am I? Really not what you show the world. Not the role you perform. Not the mask you've worn so long you forgot it was never your face. But you, at your rawest, at your most honest. The version of you that doesn't need validation, that doesn't shrink, that doesn't perform. The version that builds not for applause, but because it refuses to leave this world without making a mark. That version is waiting, and the only thing standing in the way is your identity. Your identity is the blueprint of everything you allow or deny. It's the silent governor of your potential. You don't rise to the level of your ambition. You fall to the strength of your identity. So if you want to change your life permanently, radically, irreversibly, you don't start with your habits. You start with your identity. And identity begins with one ruthless decision. I will no longer live as the person I was trained to be. I will become the person I was born to be. No backup plans, no soft landing, no emotional negotiation. A line in the sand, crossed with fire in your eyes. Think of every man or woman who ever left a mark. Lincoln didn't become Lincoln because he felt confident. He became Lincoln when he decided that integrity mattered more than acceptance. Edison didn't invent the light bulb because he had better tools. He had better standards. Ford didn't revolutionize the world because the odds were in his favor. He did it because he refused to accept the identity of a man who simply followed instructions. What separated them from everyone else wasn't talent, it was identity. A deep, unshakable knowing of who they were, what they were here for, and what lines they would never cross. You've been lied to, told to build habits before you build identity. But habits that contradict your identity will always collapse. That's why you're self-sabotage. That's why you relapse. That's why you set goals with fire and abandon them in silence. Because the actions don't match the internal story. Your identity whispers, "This isn't who I am," and eventually, you listen. So if you want to become unshakable, you don't start by asking, "What should I do?" You start by asking, "Who must I become?" Because when you anchor your actions to identity, you stop needing willpower. You stop starting over. You stop chasing motivation. You simply act because it's who you are. But identity isn't given, it's forged. And forging takes heat. So if you're waiting for it to feel easy, understand this now. There is no easy path to becoming unshakable. There is only the narrow, sacred road of discipline, decision, and discomfort. You'll be misunderstood. You'll lose people. You'll mourn the comfort of being liked more than you celebrate the courage of being real. But once you make the decision, The ruthless decision to stop living from memory and start living from vision, you will feel something that no dopamine hit can offer alignment. The greatest peace you'll ever feel is the moment your actions finally reflect your purpose. You don't need external applause when your soul is clapping. You don't need a crowd when your conscience is clear. You don't need permission when your path is forged in conviction. But none of that is possible without identity. So what is yours? Really ask yourself, who are you when no one's looking? Who are you when the mask comes off? When the applause dies down? When no one is posting, liking, or commenting? Because that's the version of you that's building your life, not the one online, not the one in meetings or small talk. The one in the mirror late at night that only you can hear. And that voice, that version of you, will either build you or break you. 0457. You don't attract what you want. You attract who you are. Not what you post, not what you preach. Who you are at the level of frequency, thought, and decision. You want to become a millionaire. Stop identifying as someone trying to get rich. Start identifying as a builder, a strategist, an executor. Start speaking differently, thinking longer, moving faster, letting go quicker. You want to become disciplined. Don't just follow a plan. Burn the part of you that needs one. Make discipline your identity. Make it who you are, not something you try on when it's convenient. Because when identity shifts, everything shifts. You no longer try to go to the gym, you're an athlete. You no longer try to be consistent, you're a finisher. You no longer try to lead, you're a leader. Identity becomes gravity. It pulls actions into place. It rewires thought. It destroys excuses. It silences the inner critic, not with hype, but with proof. Proof that you have finally decided. This is who I am now. And you don't need to explain it. You don't need to post about it. You don't need anyone to understand it. Because identity doesn't need to be announced. It needs to be lived. So make the decision. The ruthless one. The one that says, I'm done waiting to become something. I already am. You're not broken. You're buried. You don't need fixing. You need to remember. You need to remember who you were before the world taught you to shrink. Before comparison. Before doubt. Before comfort whispered lies in the language of logic. And you need to choose. Choose to become unshakable. Not someday, not in theory. There is no ceremony for this decision. No fireworks. No round of applause. Just a quiet moment where you break the contract with your past. The contract that said you're inconsistent. You always fall off. You're not built like them. You'll change. Later. Burn it. Right now, in this moment, you write a new one. A contract with your future. A vow that says, I will no longer explain my shortcomings. I will erase them. I will no longer beg for motivation. I will create movement. I will no longer perform for attention. I will produce for impact. Because the truth is, you don't get what you deserve. You get what you're willing to become. And becoming begins with identity. Most people try to behave their way into belief. They say the affirmations. They read the books. They try to imitate success. But the mirror always wins. If what you see in the mirror still whispers imposter, eventually you'll prove yourself right. You have to believe it first. And belief isn't fluffy. It's brutal. It means you stop waiting to feel confident and start acting like you are. It means you stop craving reassurance and start delivering results. It means you stop identifying with the version of you who talks and start becoming the version of you who executes. Every legend had to break away from the old self. That's why it's called a decision. It divides. It cuts. It costs. The old identity will fight for survival. It will whisper, just take one day off. Don't be so extreme. You're changing too fast. But that voice isn't truth. That's the echo of your conditioning. And conditioning is powerful until purpose shows up. Because when purpose walks in, hesitation walks out. 0854. So stop waiting for proof. Be the proof. Be the evidence that a new identity is possible. That someone can come from chaos and still choose clarity. That someone can grow up undisciplined and still become relentless. That someone can be doubted and still win. You don't need a clean past. You need a clean decision. And that decision has to be so final, so focused, so fierce, that even when it's inconvenient, you move. Even when it's uncomfortable, you act. Even when no one sees it, you build. Because that's what identity is. It's what you do when no one's watching. You want to know who you are. Look at your rituals. Not your goals, not your affirmations. Your rituals. Do you negotiate with them? Do you skip them when it's hard? Or are they your spine, unbending, unbreakable? Most people wake up and drift into the day. They wait to feel productive. They wait to feel focused. They wait to feel ready. But not you. Because your identity doesn't wait. It commands. It moves. It shapes the day instead of reacting to it. When your identity is unshakable, your mornings aren't accidents. Your decisions aren't based on feelings. Your actions aren't up for debate. You rise with intention. You train with clarity. You work with urgency. You recover with structure. You rest on purpose, not by accident. Because you're not surviving anymore. You're building. And builders don't wait for comfort to show up before they begin. They bring structure where chaos lives. They bring vision where excuses thrive. They bring identity where the old self used to dominate. Let them scroll. Let them search for a shortcut. Let them chase dopamine disguised as progress. You're not them anymore. You don't just want momentum. You want transformation. And transformation means subtraction before addition. You remove everything that fractures your focus. You cut the leaks. You eliminate the just these once decisions. Because you're not collecting habits, you're constructing identity. And every construction site needs one thing first: demolition. You have to demolish the belief that you'd need permission to go all in. That you have to earn intensity. That being disciplined makes you rigid. No. Being disciplined makes you dangerous. You think you're tired, you're underutilized. You think you're burnt out, you're out of alignment. You think you're not ready. You're overthinking. You don't need more content. You need more conviction. And conviction starts with a decision so ruthless, you delete the backup plan. You remove the option to try again later. You turn your I hope into I become. Because this isn't about creating a better schedule. This is about becoming a different person. You want the world to take you seriously. Take your identity seriously. You want to command respect. Command yourself. Wake up like it matters. Train like it matters. Speak like it matters. Act like every movement is proof that the old you is gone. Because this isn't a phase. It's not a challenge. It's not a motivation spike. This is your evolution. And evolution isn't loud. It's not aesthetic. It doesn't care about followers or trends. It's slow. It's brutal. It's internal. And it is absolute. Evolution doesn't beg for applause. It doesn't ask for validation. It happens in the dark while no one is watching, while the world is distracted, while everyone else is still talking about what they're going to do. And here you are, no longer seeking hype, no longer begging for motivation, but quietly, ruthlessly building. Because that's what it means to forge identity, not in bursts, not in moods, but in silence, when it's cold, when it's inconvenient, when every part of you wants to go back to the old way, and you say, no, that version of me doesn't run this life anymore. That's what it means to be unshakable, not perfect, not emotionless, but immovable in who you are. And that strength, it doesn't come from reading. It comes from remembering. Remembering that you weren't born with hesitation. You were born with hunger. You were born with instinct. But somewhere along the way, you were trained to doubt it. And now your job is to unlearn everything that taught you to settle. Because you weren't built to be passive. You weren't made to be mediocre. There is nothing inside you that was designed to fit in. And that's why the average life makes you anxious. Because your soul remembers the original blueprint. The one that came before fear, before failure, before fitting in, became survival. And now you're being called not by a trend, not by another voice online, but by something primal, something louder than logic, something that doesn't negotiate, your next identity. And that version of you, they don't need to be convinced to act. They don't need reminders. They move. Because they no longer ask, what do I feel like doing today? They ask what must be done regardless of how I feel. That is the shift. From emotion to execution. From moods to movement. From scrolling to stacking. Stacking bricks. Stacking proof. Stacking days not for streaks, but for structure. Because discipline is not about forcing yourself. It's about freeing yourself from chaos, from doubt, from distraction. You think discipline is harsh. Try living without it. Try living in the storm of inconsistency. Try waking up every day unsure of who you are or where you're headed. That's suffering. Discipline is peace. Discipline is self-respect in motion. Discipline is how you remind your mind, we don't fold anymore. That's the energy you need to bring. Not intensity for 1 week, standards for life. Because the world will offer you 100 reasons to slow down. People will cheer for you when you're soft because it makes them comfortable. They'll say you're too serious, too focused, too extreme. But what they're really saying is, you're reminding me of what I gave up on. Don't shrink to fit their comfort. Rise to match your calling. You don't owe anyone an explanation for wanting more. You don't need permission to outgrow their version of you. And you don't have to apologize for raising your standards when your soul is starving for expansion. Because at the end of this life, no one will hand you peace. You will either earn it through execution, or you'll live with the ache of what could have been. That's the cost. Not just of success, of becoming you, the real you, the one who doesn't flinch. The one who moves in silence and roars in results. The one who outworks his weaknesses. The one who sacrifices being liked to become respected first by others and eventually by himself. Because, let's be honest, you're not really afraid of failure. You're afraid of becoming unstoppable and having to leave the old you behind. You're afraid of the solitude that comes with seriousness. You're afraid of what happens when you run out of excuses, and all that's left is power. But that's the doorway, and it only opens when you stop knocking and kick it down. Don't wait for someone to hand you the new identity. You carve it, you decide it, you embody it so fiercely, so consistently that the old version of you wouldn't even recognize the person you've become. You want to lead, start by leading yourself. In the quiet, in the dark. When no one's around to validate you, and that's when it counts most. That's when character is born. That's when confidence is built. That's when identity becomes unshakable. And from there, everything changes. Not overnight, but unavoidably. Because you no longer set goals and hope. You build systems and expect. You no longer chase motivation. You chase momentum. You no longer dip your toe into commitment. You drown the old self and rise as the new one. And once that decision is made, there is no going back. Because nothing back there belongs to you anymore. You can't be who you were and become who you're meant to be at the same time. One of them has to die. And most people, they keep both on life support. One foot in progress, the other in the past. They whisper, I want change, but protect the very habits that keep them stuck. They say they want freedom, but worship comfort like a god. They say they want discipline, but live in negotiation. That's not transformation. That's survival with a mask on. You want to change, burn the bridge. The one that leads back to sometimes. The one that leads back to just this once. The one that leads back to, I'll start over next week. There is no next week. There is only now. There is only this identity you're either reinforcing or rejecting with every action, every choice, every standard you uphold or break. Because identity is not a moment. It's a pattern. You don't become disciplined by doing it once. You become disciplined by becoming undeniable about what you tolerate. You don't become consistent by reading about it. You become consistent when you stop asking, should I, and start saying, this is non-negotiable. And you don't become unshakable by waiting for the world to respect you. You become unshakable when you stop betraying yourself. Self-betrayal is the root of every identity crisis. You say you want focus, but you check your phone every 12 minutes. You say you want power, but you hand it away to every distraction that blinks. You say you want to build, but you let mood dictate movement. You think the world is holding you back. It's not. You are. You're one decision away from being unstoppable. But it's not just any decision. It's a ruthless one. The kind that doesn't leave a back door open. The kind that says, I'm done lying to myself. I'm done talking big and living small. I'm done being inspired and staying unchanged. That decision will cost you. It will cost you who you were. It will cost you comfort. It will cost you the excuse that I'll get serious later. But what you gain? That's the trade that no one tells you about. Because on the other side of ruthless identity is peace. Not the peace of avoidance, the peace of alignment. The peace that comes when your actions no longer contradict your intentions. The peace that comes when your words and your follow-through look identical. The peace of no longer needing to explain who you are because it's obvious in how you move. That kind of peace isn't loud. It doesn't need to post every win. It doesn't need to justify its pace. It builds in silence. And then, it echoes. There's a reason most people never feel that peace. Because peace has a gatekeeper. And its name is sacrifice. Sacrifice of impulse. Sacrifice of distraction. Sacrifice of the version of you who was just good enough to get by. But sacrifice isn't suffering, it's strategy. The builder sacrifices noise for clarity. The warrior sacrifices popularity for power. The visionary sacrifices short-term pleasure for long-term proof. And you, if you're serious, will have to do the same. Because you don't rise by chance. You rise by choice repeated so consistently that your mind stops doubting it. Repetition isn't boring. It's the birthplace of belief. Every time you keep the promise, every time you train when no one sees, every time you say no when you used to fold, you're not just acting differently. You're becoming someone else. And eventually you'll wake up and realize this isn't something you're doing anymore. It's just who you are. And that's when the shift happens. Not when others notice. When you notice. When your excuses start to sound like lies. When skipping becomes unthinkable. When procrastination starts to taste like poison. Because now your nervous system is calibrated to integrity. You've reconditioned yourself to win not because you're chasing motivation, but because your identity no longer allows failure to feel comfortable. That's what it means to be unshakable. Your standards are the anchor. And storms only shake people who haven't decided where they stand. You don't need better habits. You need a harder line. You need the kind of internal code that says, I don't care how I feel today, this gets done. I don't care if I'm misunderstood. I'm becoming who I was sent here to be. I don't care who doubts me, I've already decided. That decision becomes your firewall. Against distraction. Against doubt. Against the impulse to fold under pressure. Because you don't fold anymore. You forge. You want a better future. Then stop building from emotion. Start building from identity. You want freedom. Then structure your life so ruthlessly around the person you're becoming that the old version of you has no air left to breathe. Wait. No more maybe. No more let me think about it. No more, I'll get to it. This is the new law. If it matches the man I'm becoming, it stays. If it doesn't, it's cut. That's the edge. That's the separation. And it all begins with the decision you make right now. Most people live on loop. Same thoughts, same habits, same identity repackaged every January. They don't need more information, they're drowning in it. What they lack is a moment of finality, the moment they stop asking, "What's the best way?" and start declaring, "This is who I am now." That's not philosophy, that's physics. Identity creates momentum. And momentum is not motivation, it's mass in motion. Once you move from decision, the resistance begins to break. Once you move without negotiation, you stop burning energy on doubt. And once your identity aligns with your behavior, you stop restarting every Monday like a prisoner begging for parole. You don't need a better routine. You need a new relationship with yourself. Because let's be honest, you've made promises before. To wake up early, to follow through, to stop quitting on yourself. But those weren't failures of discipline. They were failures of identity. You tried to act like the new you while still identifying as the old you. It's like dressing a warrior in rags and wondering why he doesn't fight. The behavior never sticks if the identity doesn't shift. So this time, you don't just act differently. You become different. This isn't behavior change. It's belief change. At the root. At the cellular level. At the level where your language changes, your posture changes, your silence becomes sharper than other people's speeches. That's what happens when identity locks in. When it does, you walk into every room differently. You don't ask, "Am I enough?" You walk in like you belong there, because you've trained like you do. You don't wonder if you're being too intense. You bring presence so strong, it silences shallow conversation. You don't chase people. You chase mission, and that energy draws the right ones towards you and repels the rest. Because you're not trying to be liked. You're trying to become. And becoming requires the brutal courage to say, if this version of me isn't respected by my environment, then my environment has to go. Yes, it's lonely. Yes, it's misunderstood. Yes, it's quieter at the top of your own standard. But you didn't come here to be understood. You came here to build. And the more deeply you build your identity, the less you need the world to clap. Because the world will see it in your eyes, in your rhythm, in the way you show up when others ghost, in the way you execute when others hesitate, in the way you don't flinch when things get hard. Unshakable identity does that. It makes pressure your ally, not your enemy. It makes structure your freedom, not your prison. It makes silence your superpower, not your insecurity. And over time, everything shifts. Not because the world changed, but because you did. You'll notice conversations that used to interest you don't. You'll notice habits that used to soothe you, disgust you. You'll notice people who used to distract you fade away because your frequency is no longer compatible with comfort. That's not isolation, that's ascension. And the people meant to grow with you, they'll rise to meet your standard or they'll step aside. Either way, you keep building. You build when it's boring. You build when it's ugly. You build when your emotions say quit. Because you stopped listening to emotions like they're gospel. Emotion is a whisper, but identity is a command. And when that command is wired into your nervous system, you stop negotiating with yourself like a weak manager and start moving like a sovereign force. You want to rise, then speak to yourself like a leader. Treat your mind like a soldier. And don't you dare make comfort your compass. Comfort doesn't lead you to greatness. It leads you to repeat. And you're not here to repeat. You're here to redefine. Redefine what it means to show up. Redefine what it means to be consistent. Redefine what it means to own your life. No more saying, "That's just who I am." You are who you decide to be today. Not who your parents modeled. Not who your past conditioned. not who your doubts have worshipped for decades. You are the result of what you repeatedly do. So today, do something your old self would never dare. Wake up earlier. Move with precision. Say no to what's easy. Say yes to what's required. Then say nothing. And let the results speak. Because real identity doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself in action, in follow-through, in consistency without a camera. People may not notice it at first. Good. Let them doubt you. Let them whisper. And then let them watch you rise not once but daily, with the kind of quiet power that makes the noise irrelevant. And when they finally ask, "How did you do it?" you won't say much. You'll smile and remember the moment you made that one ruthless decision. They'll think it happened overnight, that you got lucky, that something finally clicked. But you'll know the truth. It wasn't a click, it was a cut. A ruthless surgical separation from the version of you that used to settle. You didn't wait for clarity, you moved. You didn't wait for motivation, you built momentum. You didn't wait for proof, you became the proof. And that's the difference between most people and you. They wait to feel worthy before they begin. You built worthiness with every rep, every ritual, every day you did what the old you would have skipped. You trained yourself to believe, not with words, but with evidence. Because the mind doesn't believe what you say, it believes what you repeat. And repetition carves the grooves that become your internal truth. The truth that you follow through. The truth that you rise on time. The truth that you finish what you start. And the deeper that truth is drilled into your system, the less it becomes about motivation, and the more it becomes about who you are. That's the essence of identity. It's not hype. It's not aesthetics. It's not who you are when you're being watched. It's who you are when no one's keeping score but you. And when you build that, when you build integrity at the level of identity, you unlock something most people never experience. You stop chasing goals and you start embodying standards. You stop checking boxes and you start moving in alignment. You stop asking, "What do I need to do today?" and start living from a place where the doing is automatic because it's part of your being. You're no longer trying to become the person you admire. You are that person, not in the future, now. And when you operate from that place, the world bends. It doesn't mean everything becomes easy. It means you become solid, grounded, clear. You don't avoid resistance. You move toward it. You don't fear discomfort. You extract power from it. You don't let pain define you. You let it refine you. Because when identity is forged in fire, there's nothing left to prove, only more to build. And what you build now, it's not just success. It's not just income. It's not just attention. It's internal gravity. The kind of force that draws opportunities, relationships, breakthroughs. Not because you chase them, but because your energy makes it undeniable. And people will ask you, how do you stay consistent? How do you stay focused? How do you keep showing up? And you'll smile, not because it's easy, but because you already made the decision. You already drew the line. You already crossed it, and you don't look back. That's the part they won't see. The nights you showed up with no applause. The mornings you kept your word with no witness. The rituals you followed when your mind begged you to stop. But that's when the new you were being born. Not when it was visible, but when it was inevitable. And now, you're living in what you built. The rhythm, the clarity, the peace. You didn't wait for it to find you. You constructed it from raw discipline and uncompromising standards. And now that you have it, you guard it. You protect it with boundaries. You elevate it with learning. You reinforce it with silence. Because this version of you, he doesn't collapse under chaos. She doesn't shrink in comparison. They rise. They anchor. They lead. And the leadership isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. Because when your identity is unshakable, your presence is your power. You walk into rooms differently. Not seeking attention, but commanding it, because your integrity speaks before your words ever do. So don't chase the old high, chase structure. Don't chase the next hack. Chase alignment. Don't chase being impressive. Chase being immovable in your mission, because everything you've ever wanted is not hiding in a better tactic. It's hiding in a better identity. And identity is not gifted. It's not downloaded. It's not given when you hit a certain milestone. It's claimed. In silence. In sweat. In solitude. You don't have to broadcast it. You don't have to market it. You don't have to explain it. You just have to decide. One decision to rise. One decision to cut the old identity at the root. One decision to build a life that looks like your purpose, not your past. And that decision, it doesn't shout. It whispers, "This is who I am now, and there is no going back." You've made the decision. Not to tweak your habits, not to improve a little, but to become. And now the air feels different. Your priorities shift. The clutter falls away. You start cutting fast, not because you're cold, but because you're clear. That's what happens when identity takes the throne. You stop explaining. You stop chasing. You stop trying to prove your worth through the opinions of people who aren't even building themselves. Because this time, you're not asking what do they think. You're asking, does this fit the future me or not? If it doesn't, cut. If it drains your focus, cut. If it weakens your word, cut. And every cut is an act of self-respect. This is the misunderstood part of evolution. It's not just about what you add. It's about what you no longer allow. You start saying no without guilt. You start leaving the room without explanation. You start unfollowing without hesitation. Because you're not curating a feed, you're constructing a life. A life that matches your values. A schedule that matches your discipline. A rhythm that doesn't drain you, it fuels you. And it all happens not because you discovered a better hack, but because you became someone who doesn't need one. There is no secret anymore. You are the system. You are the framework. You are the breakthrough that others are still searching for in books, podcasts, and surface-level routines. The ones who win in life aren't the ones who learn the most. They're the ones who embody what they've already learned with no excuse and no delay. And embodiment only happens when identity shifts. When you stop saying, "I'm trying," and start saying, "This is what I do now." Because once that becomes your language, your entire nervous system rewrites itself. You begin to operate on a new frequency. You attract discipline because you've normalized it. You attract alignment because your life is ruled by design. You attract peace not from doing less, but from doing what's necessary without mental friction. And that peace, it doesn't come with celebration. It comes with repetition. It comes after 30, 60, 90 days of showing up when it was hard, when it was boring, when it was silent. You stop needing to be motivated because you now move with identity-driven execution. And that's the truth most people won't want to hear. They don't want to hear that change requires them to burn the script. They want to be upgraded without being undone. But transformation demands both. You must unlearn. You must dismantle the identity that's been built on convenience, distraction, and approval. You must stop clinging to the version of you that plays it safe, the version that talks more than it acts, that watches more than it works, that plans more than it executes. That version of you can't come with you. Let them go, because on the other side of letting go, you find something so few ever touch: true power. Not performative power, not curated confidence, but earned identity. The kind that doesn't crack when life punches you in the mouth. The kind that stands when the deal falls through. The kind that moves even when the fire's gone. You earn it by doing the work with no spotlight. You earn it by keeping the promise when no one else knows it was even made. You earn it by becoming the kind of person that your past self would never believe and your future self would never betray. That's the shift. From hoping to knowing. From reacting to leading. From waiting to building. You don't get that from tips and tricks. You get that from identity. And identity comes from one place: decisions followed by discipline. Repeated, daily, relentlessly, until the old you break from starvation and the new you become undeniable. And when that happens, when identity becomes the lens through which you see everything, you stop falling off because there's nowhere to fall to. You've outgrown the old traps. You've outlived the excuses. You've outworked the guilt. And now you walk head up, shoulders back, not because you're pretending, but because your entire system remembers who you are. Not perfect, not superhuman, but decided, rooted, unshakable. Because you finally understood. You were never one habit away. You were never one hack away. You were one ruthless decision away. And now that decision has been made, you don't hope. You build. And when you build from identity, you stop measuring your growth by the metrics of the masses. You stop counting likes. You stop needing praise. You stop performing for applause that doesn't build anything real. Because the builder inside you no longer finds joy in being seen. You find it in becoming solid. You find it in truth. You find it in living a life that doesn't flinch even when no one's looking. That's the turning point. When your life becomes an extension of your values, not your feelings. When your routine is shaped by your mission, not your mood. When your environment starts conforming to your energy, not the other way around. The world bends. Not for the most talented, not for the most charismatic, but for the most certain. And certainty isn't a trait. It's a result. It's what happens when you prove to yourself day by day, inch by inch, that you can be trusted. Not just with discipline, but with power, with purpose, with peace. And people around you will start to feel it. They won't know what changed. They'll just say things like, "You're different. You feel sharper. You seem unshakable." Because that's what happens when you've anchored your identity in conviction. And it's not loud. You don't need to wear it. You don't need to say it. Because it shows in how you walk into a room. It shows in how you handle pressure. It shows in how little you need to prove anything. That's the irony. The more powerful you become, the less you need people to notice. Because at some point, you stop living for admiration and start living for alignment. You become dangerous to your old self, to distraction, to comfort, to anyone who hoped you'd stay quiet, small, and inconsistent. You didn't just become better. You became inevitable. And the people who watched you shift will wonder how. They'll ask what changed. They'll look for the hack. They'll dig for the shortcut. But all they'll find is a moment no one saw. No music, no celebration, just you. You and the silence, you and the decision, you and the moment where everything fractured, and you chose to build instead of break. That's the moment that changes lives. The quiet decision that nobody claps for. The one where you whispered to yourself, "I'm done performing. I'm done procrastinating. I'm done pretending." And in that moment, you didn't find your power. You forget it, because that's the final truth about identity. You don't wait for it to appear. You make it undeniable. Not in theory, in practice, in decisions, in motion. You make it real through work. Work no one else will see. Work no one else will understand. Work no one else will do because they're still waiting to feel ready. But you decided that readiness is a lie, that transformation is violent, that building is bloody, and that nothing truly worth becoming comes easy. So now you move, without the noise, without the need for someone to believe in you, because you finally do. And when you believe at that level, your voice changes, your posture shifts, your relationships sharpen, your tolerance drops. You no longer allow small talk in spaces where purpose belongs. You no longer allow weak energy in rooms where execution lives. You no longer tolerate your own distractions because you've built something worth protecting, now your identity. This is the moment where building becomes breathing, where your rituals feel less like routines and more like remembering. You're not trying anymore. You're aligning. And everything that doesn't fit, it dissolves. Not because you cut people off, but because when you lock into discipline, distraction removes itself. That's what they'll never tell you. You don't always need to fight your old habits. You just need to become someone they no longer recognize. And when that identity is born, there's no version of you that could ever go back. So now the question isn't, how do I stay consistent? It's, how do I protect what I've become? How do I shield this foundation? How do I reinforce it? How do I multiply it? Because now, you're not just building for yourself, you're building for the legacy, the ripple, the stranger who sees your discipline from a distance and thinks, maybe I can become that too. That's leadership. That's impact. That's the life you were born to live, but had to decide to become. This is where it gets real, because once you've built the identity, the world starts handing you the tests, not to break you, but to prove you, to see if your identity was just a performance or if it's now your nature. People will question your boundaries. Your discipline will be mocked. Your silence will make others uncomfortable. And they will try to pull you back to the version of you they were more comfortable with. But you won't move. Not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you already know who you are now. And when you know, you don't flinch. You don't explain your growth to people who still measure life in comfort. You don't water down your mission for people still afraid of clarity. You don't step off your path to entertain someone else's doubt. You just walk, head high, standards higher, eyes locked on the future you're constructing, not because it's trendy, but because you've tasted what it's like to live in full alignment, and nothing else feels right anymore. And that's when you realize something profound. You don't miss the old you. You thought you would. You thought you'd miss the comfort, the distractions, the way things used to be. But all you feel now is relief. Because the old you was surviving. This you is building, and you've earned this feeling. It didn't come cheap. It came through sweat-soaked mornings, through hard conversations, through quiet days of doubt where you moved anyway. This version of you wasn't created. It was forged. And now the mission gets deeper. Because now you know the truth. Your identity doesn't just define your success, it defines your impact. Because someone out there is watching you silently. They're paying attention to how you carry yourself, how you handle pressure, how you don't fold. And they won't say it. But your example is teaching them more than your words ever could. That's how legacy works. It's not announced, it's lived. It's when who you are becomes permission for someone else to rise. And that's why you don't quit. That's why you stay consistent, not just for you, but for the next person you'll never meet who sees your discipline and decides it's time to rewrite their own story. That's what you're building now. Not just a reputation, not just a routine. You're building evidence. Evidence that change is real, that it's possible to rise, that it's possible to live with power without apology, that it's possible to become the person you were born to be, even if you started from chaos, from pain, from nothing. So keep going, not for perfection, not for praise, but because your identity is now your compass. You don't wake up hoping for direction. You are the direction. You don't wait for someone to lead you. You lead yourself, and in doing so, you lead others not with volume, but with vision. This is what true success looks like. This is what transformation feels like. It's not glamorous, it's not always loud, but it is permanent. Because when identity shifts, your entire life structure follows. You walk differently. You think long-term. You make different choices at dinner, in business, in relationships, not because you're forcing it, but because the old patterns no longer match who you are. You're not managing habits anymore. You're protecting a standard. You're guarding a vision. You're honoring the future version of you who's watching and saying, yes, that's it. Keep going. We're almost there. And you will get there, not because it's written, but because you're writing it daily, deliberately, without apology. No matter how long it takes, no matter who leaves, no matter how uncomfortable the silence gets, you will finish, because the identity you have built doesn't allow quitting anymore. The identity you have built finishes what it starts. And if this season of your life has felt like pressure, good, you're in the fire. And that's where the real ones are forged. You made it, not to the end, but to the beginning of a life you no longer have to escape from. A life built by choice, not by chance. A life designed by vision, not default. A life where who you are is no longer a question, it's a statement. And that statement is loud, even in silence. It shows in your eyes, in your walk, in the way you say no without guilt, in the way you hold your standards when no one else is watching, in the way you keep building, even when no one believes in it but you. That's what it means to be unshakable. Not perfect, not flawless, but built from the inside out, and unwilling to betray the version of you that finally showed up. Look at how far you've come, not in miles, in moments. Every moment you chose truth over comfort, discipline over dopamine, action over overthinking. Every time you kept your word in silence, you were building this version of you. No one saw the reps, no one saw the doubt, no one saw the tears. But you kept moving, and that's why you're still here. Because somewhere along the way, you stopped flirting with change and made it your identity. And now your presence speaks before you do. Now your structure speaks louder than your speeches. Now your daily execution is your legacy in motion. The ones who doubted, let them talk. You don't owe them explanations. You owe yourself completion. You're not here to explain. You're here to finish. And when you finish, when the dust settles and the noise fades, they won't remember what you said. They'll remember what you embodied. That you showed up. That you rose when it was hard. That you moved through the storm and built anyway. And now your life becomes the proof. Not of luck, not of talent, but of what happens when someone makes one ruthless decision and never looks back. And from this point forward, everything you touch feels different, because it's touched by identity. It's touched by clarity. It's touched by fire. Your relationships feel cleaner. Your work feels deeper. Your words feel heavier. Your time feels sacred, because you are sacred now. No longer scrambling to be someone. You are someone, rooted, respected, unmistakably you. So when the next test comes, and it will, you won't panic. You'll remember. When doubt creeps in, and it will, you won't question everything. You'll anchor to the truth you carved out in the trenches. Because you didn't build this identity for the days that go well. You built it for the days that don't. And even then, especially then, you don't break. Because you're not operating from hype anymore. You're operating from code. A code of integrity. A code of follow-through. A code of zero compromise when it comes to your mission. And here's the part they'll never understand: the peace you feel now. It didn't come from balance. It came from alignment. It came from knowing your time is being used well. That your hours are going somewhere. That your presence is serving a mission larger than your moods. And when you live like that, you become a lighthouse for everyone still lost in their cycles. You don't yell. You shine. You don't preach. You live. And your life becomes a silent permission slip for others to rise. That is your real legacy. Not what you achieve, but who you become doing it. Not what you say, but how deeply your identity impacts everyone you touch, even if they never say a word. That's what you're building now. That's what your discipline is protecting. That's what your sacrifice is fueling. So the next time you feel like stopping, remember, you are not just building results, you are building proof. Proof that one decision made with fire, protected with focus, can change a life forever. And this life you're living now, it's not theory, it's not potential, it's real. You built it, brick by brick, day by day, choice by ruthless choice. So walk in it, live it fully, protect it fiercely, and never, never forget what it took to get here. Because when you remember, you'll never fall again. You'll never shrink again. You'll never betray this version of you again. You are unshakable now, not because you're fearless, but because you're fully decided. And the world, it doesn't need another perfect person. It needs more decided ones. So go. Move with conviction. Speak with weight. Build with quiet fire. Lead without needing applause. And finish without looking back. Because now you are the one who builds. You are the one who doesn't fold. You are the one who decided and never broke that vow. You don't need to change everything today. You just need to make one decision you no longer run from. Because identity isn't sculpted through noise, it's shaped in silence. In those quiet, private moments where you say, "This version of me is done." And you mean it, not for attention, not for applause, but because you finally see it clearly. Your life will never rise higher than the standard you accept from yourself. So maybe the question isn't, can I become more? Maybe the real question is, what would happen if I finally stopped being less? You've heard the voice. You've felt the pull. And now you know the version of you that's unshakable. Doesn't need another plan. It needs a decision, one that holds, even when nothing else does. So don't just close this video. Close the chapter. The one where you hesitated. The one where you second-guessed. The one where you almost rose. This time you don't scroll away. You step forward. One decision, fully made. No looking back.